Hi everyone. I welcome you to another video. And in this video, we're going to see and learn about the process of digestion. So, when we talk about digestion, what does it mean? Well, the digestive process is a process by which macromolecules which are present in our food are broken down into smaller molecules which are easily absorbed by the body into our blood, and then they can nourish all of our organ systems and our body can function properly. So it is the breaking down of food into smaller absorbable particles or molecules, right? And how does body achieve this process? Well, this process is not achieved in one particular location, but it actually occurs throughout the length of our alimentary canal, right? And alimentary canal is basically the long tube which extends from our mouth right down to our anus. So it is a long tube, and throughout the length of this tube is where the digestive process occurs. So, when we're talking about digestion, we know that digestion starts right from our mouth. It starts from our buccal cavity. So, when we're talking about buccal cavity, we know that in our mouth we have certain elements that help us to grind the food. And what are these called? They are called teeth. So, there are teeth whose function is to crush the food. And here the primary breaking down of food starts. So the first thing that the food undergoes is crushing, and that is due to the crushing action of our teeth. Then there are certain glands that are present inside our mouth, and they are called as salivary glands. And you can understand a gland as an organ which likes to secrete. So there are two types of glands, endocrine and exocrine, but we are not going to get in the details of it. We're going to just understand glands as organs that secrete something of importance. And here in this case, we have salivary glands, which secrete saliva. Saliva is the liquid that comes out of your mouth or engulfs that engulfs your mouth when you see something really tasty. So that is the liquid that is, gushing inside of your mouth. And then within saliva, we have an enzyme which is known as salivary amylase, right? And this enzyme is the enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates. So there are carbohydrates that are present in our food, and the first instance of breaking down of food macromolecules into simpler forms occurs in our mouth. So this is the first site of digestion. And which agent helps to digest? It is called the salivary amylase, and it is an enzyme. So what do you think is the function of tongue? Besides tasting things, tongue is also responsible for mixing the food with saliva, right? So everything gets passed this salivary amylase so that we get a good layer of saliva all over the food that goes into our mouth, right? And it helps not only to digest the sugars that are present, but it also helps for that movement of food through our throat and inside our food pipe. When the food is covered with saliva, it goes in easily, right? So this is the first step of our digestion, and our mouth is the organ which is involved. Esophagus is made out of muscles, right? And esophagus lining, which is muscular by the way, helps to push food forward. Now there is this rhythmic contraction and release. If you've ever seen an earthworm on a rainy day, you would have seen its movement, and it pushes itself forward by contracting its body first. And that is the movement that our esophagus is mimicking using the muscles that are present in it. So this movement is known as peristalsis, and our food moves down this food pipe, right? And it goes directly into the next organ that we're going to talk about, our stomach. We're going to understand that stomach is necessarily a sac which can expand. It is possible that you overeat over a period of time, you gain weight, and the capacity to eat also increases simultaneously. So that happens because stomach has a capacity to expand. Well, talking about the stomach, it has gastric juices, right? When our food goes inside the stomach, it starts the actual digestion. So, there are certain secretions that the stomach is able to produce inside it, and one of them is HCl, which we know and recognize as the hydrochloric acid, and it's really acidic and corrosive, and it does two things. First, it kills the bacteria that might enter with our food, so we can write kills bacteria or any other pathogen that might enter with our food. And also, it creates a certain acidic medium, right? Highly acidic, it creates an acidic medium. There is an enzyme called as pepsin, and it digests proteins. And this enzyme needs an acidic medium to work. So HCl creates that acidic medium for pepsin to work, right? And lastly, you might ask, that well, stomach has such corrosive acids, why doesn't our own stomach corrode due to this action? Well, we have a layer inside our stomach which is really protective in nature, and that is mucus. So mucus is the layer that protects the stomach lining. So this we can say that stomach, if esophagus is termed as the second step, so stomach will be the third step. And then inside the stomach we have gastric juices, HCl, pepsin, and mucus. Well, mucus is not exactly a juice, it's more like a covering, but it is one of the secretions that stomach is producing, right? And lastly, I want to mention, give honorary mentions to sphincter muscle. And what does this muscle do? It basically controls the exit of food from the stomach. Here, and basically it controls the exit of food from the stomach so that it doesn't just drop off into the intestines while it is, being digested. So the exit is controlled by the sphincter. The food has reached the stomach, and some of the protein has been digested, and some of the carbohydrate has been digested, but there is another macromolecule that we are missing out, and that's fats. And where does it all get digested finally? Because this is just partial digestion happening. So we will see that the main player is not stomach. We are accustomed to think that all the digestion takes place in stomach, but the main player is someone else entirely, the small intestine. The small intestine is the longest part of the alimentary canal, and even though in humans it's quite long, but it is longer in animals like deer and giraffe and all the herbivores who eat grass. Why is it so? Because the herbivores, they're eating grass and the grass has cellulose in it, as you've studied about plant cells, they have cellulosic cell walls, and these animals need to digest cellulose, which is quite difficult to digest, so they need a longer tube for it to go through so that the digestion can take place and the area of digestion is increased. Hotspot for digestion. Well, in small intestines, complete digestion of proteins, carbs, and lipids take place. By complete digestion, I mean that when food exits the small intestine, proteins, complex carbs, and fatty acids or fats are converted into amino acid, glucose, and glycerol, respectively. So these end products are received after the digestion in the small intestine. So here the digestion ends basically. So this is the main player, and that is why I'm saying it's the hotspot for digestion. So the fourth step of digestive process is happening inside the small intestine, right? And within the small intestine, we can say that it is receiving secretions from other organs as well. So it is receiving these secretions from two other organs, and one is the liver, which is basically giving it the bile juice, as we know, the bile juice. And the other secretion that it is receiving is from the pancreas, which secretes the pancreatic juice. So these organs, have their secretions transported into the small intestine, and these secretions act on the food inside the small intestine and not the respective liver and pancreas. So we have to remember this, that the secretions are traveling into the small intestine to work. Let us have a look at what these secretions are doing. So, first of all, remember that food from the stomach is acidic in nature because there was HCl, right? So, it was acidic. But the pancreatic juices, they need a basic medium. Okay? Pancreatic juice needs a basic medium to work. So, how is the basic medium provided? Well, the basic medium is provided by the bile juice, right? The bile not only provides the basic medium, but it also acts on fats and it converts big fat globules into smaller ones. It breaks them into smaller ones, which can be acted upon much easily. So the bile has two functions. One is to create a basic medium for the pancreatic juices to work, and the second is to break down fats. Then inside the small intestine, we also have the pancreatic juices. And what do these pancreatic juices do? Well, to understand that, we have to look at what the pancreatic juices contain. The first thing is trypsin. Trypsin is a protease, and proteases are basically enzymes which break down protein. So, trypsin acts on proteins and breaks it down. Pancreatic juice also has lipases which break down fats. Inside the small intestine, you also have juices which break down carbohydrates into simple sugars like glucose. So finally, at the small intestine phase, we get the amino acids, then we get our glucose. So amino acids are derived from proteins. Glucose was obtained when complex carbs broke down, right? And then we have fatty acids or fats which break down to give glycerol. So this is the final thing that we get inside the small intestine. Well, absorption that is occurring in small intestine is due to structures known as villi. So if we're talking about villi, we have to understand that these structures are basically made for absorption. So they are present inside the coils of our small intestine and they are finger-like projections. So they can be seen like this. They are finger-like and they are abundant in the blood vessels. They are really abundant in the blood vessels. So blood is there and the food which is digested can quickly get absorbed and go inside our bloodstream, right? The molecules that have been broken down, they can quickly be absorbed through the villi. Villi also does another job, and that is to increase the surface area for absorption. Surface area for absorption. Well, you know that if we have something large and we want to store it in a smaller surface, we fold it. So folds are something that give a lot of surface area, and in this case, villi is giving a lot of surface area for absorption of our food molecules, and these are present in the small intestine, right? The food is getting absorbed in the small intestine, then what is the role of our last player here? Is the large intestine. And we can understand large intestine as the fifth and final step in the process of digestion. Well, the large intestine is actually smaller in length to the small intestine. And in the large intestine, all the unabsorbed food, which mainly consists of really fibrous food, which had which has no further nutrients to be absorbed from. Here, all that food goes through these large intestine and remaining nutrients are absorbed. Nutrients plus water is absorbed. And finally, when there is nothing more to absorb from the food, the waste then travels from the large intestine out of our body from our anus. So, this is the journey of our food and how it is digested. I hope you understood this process through my little presentation. And if you have further doubts, you can leave them in the comment section. Thank you very much.